Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Evolution of Emotional Intelligence, What Truly is EI, presented by our Head of Leadership Growth at Watermark Learning, Dr. J. Pugh. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting in moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use that chat or the Q&A option for a short Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today, so without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. J.
Hey, thank you so much, and welcome everybody to the evolution of emotional intelligence, where it's heading, what is it, how do we get there? For those, as it was mentioned, my name is Dr. J. Pugh. I'm our head of leadership growth. Been in this space for about 17 years, author, leader in sort of the space of engagement, and EQ follows very, very closely to that. So I want to welcome you all for joining me. I love to make these very, very interactive in this case. And so as we kick this off, and I'm actually going to turn off my camera. What I've learned with these webinars is these have been so good, just with everybody that has joined, that it'll actually freeze up and it may end up kicking me out with this. But I really want to know this answer from you. If you can, how do you really define what intelligence is? Is it something innate? Is it something that can be learned? What is intelligence from your perspective? I'll give everybody a moment to type the responses in the chat. I like it. So we're seeing that it's innate. Wisdom and humility. I love this. The ability to learn with the willingness. Ooh. Understanding others. Growth mindset, that there's always room for learning. It's learned and innate. I like where we're going with this. Knowledge and utilization of the knowledge. Experiences. I love this. Ability to learn, which can be developed. It's a skill. It can be nuanced. Oh, so good with what I'm seeing here. This is great. Obtaining the information, combination, absolutely. Collecting, assessing, gathering, understanding, cultivation. This is so great. I love that. Truly, one answer I'm seeing too is intelligence is understanding where to find the answers, because you don't necessarily have all of the answers. It is self-awareness. It first starts with nature. There can be components going in, but it takes nurture and allows it to flourish. I love where this is coming in. And data becomes information. As we learn new data, we learn new skills, we learn new adjustments. Sorry about that, folks. We are breaking the internet. These responses are so good, we're breaking the internet on this. So no, I just love what I'm seeing. This is so good. And the reason why I love what was just typed out is because you're right, is that there's this understanding that initially intelligence from an IQ perspective is typically something that is a nature component. It normally is something that we obtain from sort of, there can be things that are genetic, there can be things that have adjusted. There are some nurture components that go into this. And so, what I really want us to understand is that historically, the way people have viewed intelligence came from a space of how smart you are. And it's just almost an true definition of acquiring and understanding information, which is great. But now, what has really happened, especially over the last 30 to 40 years, is that we've recognized that, you know what? Intelligence is not solely based on IQ alone. Really, what true intelligence is takes a component of the IQ, which is your ability to read situations, gather data, gather knowledge. It's your ability to understand people as well, and really breaking that down. And then there truly is an understanding of, saw a few people say self-awareness. Which what I love about self-awareness is getting to the space of saying, you know what, I really need to learn a little bit more about the way that I am and how I communicate. There's some personality components that go into that. And I bring this up because I'm sure that there's people out there that we have run into that we go, why are you the way that you are? And probably very similar ways, they say the same thing about us once in a while. So there's much more of a human component that goes into intelligence these days. And a matter of fact, there are some really key important things that what they find that is emotional intelligence is one of the critical skills to move up into leadership. There's been research, there's been polls and studies on it. It really does hone in very specifically on understanding that EI, emotional intelligence, is something that really people look for in moving into leadership. And so, can you learn EI? And so the idea here is that this emotional competence, it is a different approach than simply just, hey, I'm learning a skill, I'm learning Excel, or I'm learning PowerPoint, or I'm learning cybersecurity, or I'm learning software development. It's a very different component because it involves the entire brain. It involves a lot of the social brain aspects that come into this. It requires the left front and right side of your brain. And it really does come with this mindset. And I saw a chat response that I thought was so brilliant was it takes that commitment to stay mindful in the approach. And I don't know how many of you have seen, is anybody on TikTok by chance? I know there was the very mindful, very demure sort of approach. And as we go through that, yeah, quick hand raise is perfect there. And I bring that up because mindfulness is such a key skill in emotional intelligence, too, to stay present within your own self and to understand the way that you learn, to understand the way that you process information, to understand the way that you communicate with others. And so this is something that can always be grown. It can always be learned. And so, as we get into this, I want us to talk about the four major pieces that go into emotional intelligence. Is there anybody that knows what those four pieces are? Sort of the four things that we have to demonstrate the mindfulness or consistent understanding of? Does anybody know any of those? One was already said, one which was self awareness, which was brilliant. Yes, Jay, love that. And great name, by the way, gotta admit. So yes, self-regulation is the second piece of that, or what they call self-management. You're absolutely right. So Terry, what I love with the active listening side is that is a huge piece in what we call social awareness. That's social awareness. And I like where we're going. Yeah, the social and situational. And I don't want to mispronounce. So if it's Resa, please, I don't like to mispronounce. Correct me. I love to make sure I get names right. And you're right. It is the self awareness, the self management, the self or social awareness. Rahisa, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And the social management. That is correct, Christina. And when we get to these four things, and Bradbury and Greaves is one of the newer. Daniel Goleman's the father, one of the fathers of emotional intelligence, and Bradbury and Greaves does a lot more research in that space more recently. And the things behind it is the first two pieces of this is really looking inward at oneself, right? It's your ability to look inward. And Felix, we are absolutely going to talk about empathy. We're going to talk about where that applies to. And the other two pieces is much more about the outward approach. It's much more looking outward to others. So in this case, when we're looking at understanding the way that we tick and the way that others tick, what ends up happening, the EQ is more of the creative side of the brain, Danielle. Yeah, it's more on the creative social brain, what would they call the social brain that goes into it. The social emotional brain is typically what that's called. That's a great question. If there's damage, can this be overcome or learned? I think there's room for it. There is. I think the fact is that if there is something that is missing, it might take a lot more concerted effort, just like I don't want to say learning to walk again, but sometimes if there's damage in that case, like it's sometimes relearning and going through the synapses again of it. And so as we go through, what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to understand truly how we are. What's going to come out of great EI is the following. Number one, and I'm actually going to annotate on this side. Number one is going to be you're going to gain a lot more authenticity. When you communicate with others and you are fully self-aware and you know how to self-regulate, you start to gain a lot more authenticity in the way that you deliver a message. So, for example, I am somebody that I must admit I am a little bit more straightforward. I am direct. I am somebody that I can be a little bit blunt at times in my approach, but I recognize that and I know that about myself. So what comes out of that is I can speak with a lot more confidence. The problem is though is that if I don't pull the regulators, right? Anybody know regulators? Warren G and Nate Dogg. We have to regulate sometimes and we have to know how to. And that's the idea, Michael, is that in this case, what can happen is if I'm not careful and if I don't self manage, if I don't take an approach to step back, if I don't take an approach to step back and recognize myself, then what's going to happen is I'm going to fall into my trap. So that's why self management is so important. So I have to pull in Warren G, or sorry, Nate Dogg and Warren G, and I got to regulate. And that's what's so great. And I'm loving these messages coming in. So good. So as we get into this, what we're going to do is we're going to gain authenticity. Number two, what starts to come out is your own version of confidence in the way that you communicate. The more emotionally intelligent you are, the more confidence comes out. And that doesn't just mean that if I'm a direct person that, oh, I'm going to be more confident. I'm telling you that even the most soft spoken, the most observational people can speak with a lot more confidence in this case. It's a quiet confidence because there's a true understanding of oneself. The other thing that I really love about this is it gives you the ability of what they call, you know how they use the term reading people? It gives you so much more awareness in your ability. Yes, Manpreet, I love that. It's calm confidence. Yes. It also gives you the ability to read the room, to read people. It gives you this ability to look deeper at another individual and to say, hey, this is what's important to you. This is where I'm sitting. So I need to meet you where you are. And the other thing that it does is it builds better connection and actually loyalty because it allows you to be vulnerable, allows you to be a little bit more open in the way that it leaves a lasting impression because it allows you to create a little bit more vulnerability and transparency in your communication. And that's where the empathy side comes into play. And Simeon, I love the way that you just described this, right? Is that communicating in a way that gives the listeners the freeness to respond, right? Which is knowing your audience. And I've done other webinars to where I get into a space called CYA, and it doesn't mean what you think it does. It does kind of do it though, but it's not only, we spend a lot of time paying attention to the content, which is reactive, you're right, but knowing yourself and knowing your audience is such a critical facet. And that is what allows us to connect our teams together, to connect multiple teams together, and to connect individuals together. The way I love EQ in the connectivity is like this, and I'm just going to do a very, very simple drawing. If I am speaking with Mariella, let's say in this case, and I'm going, wow, I need to know what Mariella likes in communication. I need to pay attention to that. The other thing is, though, is how do I know if I'm hitting my target if I have no idea where I'm standing? That's why the self-awareness piece is so important. And I bring this up from an emotional intelligence side because I am somebody that if I am much more direct and straightforward and a little bit more in that case, and for those just introducing you to Mariella, Mariella is one of the best marketing people we could ever ask for. And she is just an absolute ray of sunshine. She is positivity central. She's as people-y people as people can be. And for me, I'm not necessarily that way up front. However, I know that that's where I can meet her where she is. And that's what makes this so cool in emotional intelligence is your ability to be aware of yourself and others in that moment and to continue to stay mindful allows you to shift those approaches. So that's why those four things are so important. Now, to break these down a little bit more for you, to break these down just a hair more, as we get into this, self awareness, the self awareness piece is a true understanding that you know exactly who you are. You know what it is you bring to the table. Unfortunately, that could also mean good, bad, and ugly, right? And so, once again, if it's knowing your true traits that you have. So, candidly speaking, if I may, I am somebody that I can, if people come to me if they truly need advice or if they need guidance, I'm normally not the person they go to if they really just need to vent. Now, I'm getting better with that, and that's where I have to learn self management is how can I be better with demonstrating real understanding of other people and real time to say, do you know what? They just want to vent. They don't need a solution here. And so I need to slow down and I need to just take it in. So here's my big question for you that I want us to understand. And once again, hopefully I'm not getting kicked out. I'm going to turn my camera off for this. I want you to think about this for a moment. And absolutely listening without solving, Kelly. Exactly. I want you to think of what are characteristics that you own that you're like, this is truly who I am. I am this. And I give an example because I'm four things. I am passionate. I ask truly engaging questions. I'm a little bit more raw with my authenticity, but I do demonstrate kindness in communication, which means I want you to challenge any process anytime. Those are four things. That's my peak, as they say, PEAK. So I want you to create for a moment, and this is going to be your own little brief activity within the 1 hour is I want you to have your I love this, Douglas, critical and observant. Observant, empathetic, and a processor. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera. Hopefully I'm not breaking, like I said. What is your I am statement? Excellent. Encourage your listener. Solutions, collector, and loving. I love that. A good listener, Dan. So great answers coming in. I saw good listener. I saw empathetic. I saw processors. This is so good coming into play. I really love what tolerant. Once again, so good. Pragmatic. This is why I really want you to understand I'm an ally, accepting, process oriented. So we're going to hold on for a moment. I love what I'm seeing here, the accepting, the welcoming, right? There's understanding. This is so good. I like that some of us are more pragmatic. And the reason why I bring this in is the next question I'm going to ask you that's a little bit loaded is, and you don't have to answer this, where do you struggle sometimes? And if I may lead in this case, like I am not the most empathetic in its traditional definition. I am somebody that I'm normally like, hey, how can I help clear a path for you? And not just, hey, let me stay in the moment with you here. And I know that that's something that I miss that I have to self manage. So I guess my next question for you is what do you need to maybe self manage? What do you need to self manage? So it could be control, patience. This is so good. Confrontation, self doubt, being direct, not always the most positive. Terry, see, and that's okay. And this is what I need us to understand is I'm going to tell you all something that I think as human beings, we all need to hear for just a moment. I love this. Struggle with saying no sometimes. Feedback. See, some of us are great at saying no. Others struggle with that. Some are, it's self-control. Some of it's self-confidence. Some of it's self-doubt. I ask you this question, and I just need to first say, I can't thank you enough for allowing a little bit of vulnerability in this case. I really love this. I need you all to hear something. And I don't care if it's the biggest takeaway of the day or whatever it is, or if it's does something that doesn't quite hit enough. I think as people, we all struggle to not just admit our weaknesses, but to really look at it in a way of saying, like, man, this is rough. None of us are broken. None of us are broken people. And I think that is one of the first key pieces to emotional intelligence and self-awareness is none of us are broken. It's just the ability to have the understanding to say, this is the area I have to keep in the back of my mind. This is the area that I have to really ensure that I am on top of. You know, if empathy is something, and I'm more of a tactical empathist or empath in this case, but I sometimes I need to say, do you know what? I need to take the extra moment here. This is something that I know is not quite as easy. I need to stay in that moment a little bit more with it. And that this is what I really love, Wasim, is expansion is the new broken. We're all iterations of ourselves. That's why if it's like, well, I'm not who I was 10 years ago. Of course not. We're all iterations of ourselves. And the reason why we are iterations of ourselves is because of self-management. That's where the growth comes in. So I always say self-awareness. What's so great about self-awareness is that self-awareness gives us the confidence. It gives us the confidence to be who we are. Whereas the self-management, so self-awareness gives us the confidence, self-management gives us the growth of what we're looking for. Those are the inward pieces. The outward pieces, the social awareness is really what gets people's attention. This is where it's like, man, they are just, how many of you have that leader? It's just like, man, they really just get it. Man, they see me for who I am, and they're really good at understanding the deeper side of things. And they're always on top of it, right? Social awareness is your ability to give really good invested attention. And it is, Michael, it is about how we manage ourselves versus how we manage others. The second piece of this So the second piece of this, and I might need to have some screen sharing capability on this, Mariella, or hosting. The second piece of this, and I love that. This is what I love that I'm seeing in the responses is recognizing where our gaps are. And it's not recognizing that makes us bad. It truly is what gives us growth. And the more mindful we are of that growth, the better. And so, Mariella, if I can get screen sharing capability. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Perfect. So in this case, the reason I bring this up is because it allows us to fully understand ourselves. It allows us to take a look and say, hey, I need to understand how I manage myself, and I need to understand what's important to others. This is what gives us and gives others the attention they deserve. And the last piece of this, which is the relationship management, gives us the connection that we all crave as human beings. So that's why I love this as an approach, because it truly looks at this from a holistic perspective and says, this is how we become truly better versions of ourselves without beating ourselves up, without making it seem like we're broken in some ways. We're not. That's what's so fun about this. So, how do we get to that deeper level? So, I want you to think of out of these domains, out of these domains, and I'm once again, I'm going to turn off the camera this time. And so go from there. Which of those domains do you feel like, man, I am definitely self aware, but sometimes I need to self manage? Or, hey, do you know what? I'm really good at captivating people's attention, but I'm not so great with building the deeper relationships. Or maybe, hey, I'm so good at building really good, close relationships, but I don't sort of network or gain social awareness as much as I could. What are the pieces that you feel like you got down, and what are the areas that it's like, man, this is a little bit more of a challenge? Brilliant. And Tony, just love that response too. And I love where everybody's having this like, look, really good at the social skills, not great at the self awareness. I need to learn more about who I am. Others, it's the self management, right? And Rushi, thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback. Strong sense of duty. Oh, so good. Self aware. I like that it's all four, that sometimes I need a little bit more in all four. The reason why I love this as a response, folks, is because this allows us to take a closer look at ourselves and say, this is what I need to be mindful. This is where the mindfulness comes in. That's where being mindful. So for me, I would say I'm definitely self aware. I practice self management often. I'm very, very, very good at social awareness. How many of you feel like even though you've maybe only known me for about 30 minutes, it's like, man, this guy gets me for some reason, right? It's the social awareness that I think I definitely have social awareness. The challenge is really practicing the deeper connection. So we all have things we are just trying to be mindful of in our approach. And that's what makes it fun. Pretty cool. I love this. And Danielle, to answer your question, if struggling to understand why people do not feel the way that I feel, that is a little bit more of the social awareness side of things. That's the social awareness. That's a great, great piece there. And it could be day and events, right, Terry? Is just being able to slow down, which also could be a self-management piece. Social relationships, self-management when someone is disrespectful. Yeah, very good. This is so good. I just love the reflection coming in there. Yep. This is great, folks. Awesome stuff. Really love. Hey, really don't have Terry, you and my wife sound very, very, very similar in this case because she goes, I don't have the willingness to be social, but I'm willing to dive in whenever we need to. And I think these are the things we just have to keep in mind. So, how do we self-regulate or self-manage and I love when we talked about stress in situations, right? When stress really hits, yikes. How do we self-regulate or self-manage? How do we pull Warren G and Nate Dogg? Counting. Very good. I'm going to turn off the camera for this just for a moment. It seems to be working. Breaths. Very good. Taking breaths. Ooh, walking meditation. Very good. Excellent. Love what I'm seeing. Get some music. Take a step back. Quick walks. Love the 90s. I don't know if you could tell. I'm definitely a 90s kid, early 90s kid. I like the 80s and 90s music. That's a little bit of my pocket there. So I will say that. I need to have some newer references as well as we go. Stay calm, take a break, reflect, and release with seam. I really love that approach. Yeah, using a 24-hour rule for responses, taking that mindfulness moment. David, always assuming positive intent is a great skill to have. Reading, leaving, walking away, allowing the emotions, being Matthew, I love the Ted Lasso effect that goes into this, which is, be curious, not judgmental. I love that. Find the person to vent to. Sometimes being able to just get it out makes a difference. Stopping and assessing. Essential. It could, and there's oils, there's prayer, there's closing, there's talking. So good here. And recognizing that maybe we can't solve it and be through this on our own. I just really like this. So, these are such great responses. Positive self talk, reminders, if you will, Manpreet. Excellent. So, the first thing that I really want to teach you all is all of those techniques that you're doing lead to one major concept that comes into play, and that is reframing. You are removing yourself from a situation. You are taking something, whether it's a tangible approach, whether it's something physical, right? Like oils, or it can be literally writing, coffee, something in that case, versus communicative. I need to talk to somebody, or I need to talk positive with myself. And what you're doing is you're taking that situation, you're stepping outside of yourself to get a readjustment on your perspective. And I will tell you that the sooner that you can turn that situation into what is rooted in positive psychology, in the ability to change perspective, the sooner that your stress response is lowered from a physiological standpoint. And Raisa, I love this question of why do you think there are people in positions of power who seem to lack social or situational awareness? I think because as people get moved into leadership, people are typically moved into leadership because of the skills they possess, not the leadership capabilities that they have. I think that's one piece that goes into it. I think the way that people move up is changing, but that's one of the factors. I think number two, leadership has to have an ability to say no. Leadership has, and I get that there's a difference between saying no and the way that no is said. So I think that in those cases, if we're truly talking about a lack of social awareness, that to me is typically a case where somebody is maybe highly skilled in their position and their job, but from a communicative standpoint, they might be missing that, but they were moved up because of their skill, right? The If it is something of, hey, maybe it's not a social awareness thing, but maybe it's something more of, man, they just really don't know how to communicate in a language that other people understand. That is something to where sometimes in leadership, you have to give the answer that sometimes people don't want to hear. So I think there's a couple different answers to that question. And Aaron, you're right. How can we reframe the situation when we don't have a clear outcome, right? So that's a question that's asked. If we don't have a clear outcome, one of the things that I always try to go to is what is called my circle of control. And that is a very, very bad donut. So in this case, my circle of control is there's so many things outside of this area that I can't control, right? Can't control this, can't control that, can't control the way people are going to feel about things. I can't control um the situations, the budgets that we have. I can't control those things. I can't control the change that our company's going through. I can't control, right? There's things we can't control. What I try to do to reframe to create a little bit more of a win-win outcome is I reframe to what it is we can control and find the win there. So if it is something as a situation of our company's going through rapid change, right? Our company's going through incredible change. And boy, it seems like we just don't have all of our ducks in a row. Well, I can't control the operational systems behind. I can't control the data and the systems of the way things are migrating. I can't control that. So what can I control? I can control the way I help my team navigate. I can control the way I help myself navigate. I can control taking things one step at a time and allowing myself to give grace to myself and others. Those are things I can control. And I think that's what we have to look at, because our greatest fear above anything else is our fear of the unknown. And by putting ourselves back into what it is we know we can control gives us more what is known. It tells us more of what is known and gives us more peace and ease. Pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. Folks, I'm loving these questions. I know that sometimes you can do a Q&A at the end or whatever it is, but I just love the way that this is flowing as we're going. So excellent, excellent here. So some things of reframing practices. I have a job interview and I am nervous. Do you know what that tells me? I really care about this. And the fact I really care is something really good that a company's going to want out of me. See how quick that can reframe? I have a new boss. I don't know if they're going to like me. Do you know what? This is an opportunity for me to learn something new, gain something new, and get something powerful from another resource. We need to win. We need to hit this deadline. Do you know what? I think it's such a privilege that we get the opportunity to compete, and make things better for other people. I feel like I'm being judged. You know what? I could look at this one of two ways. I could look exactly, and that's what we're talking about here is one of the greatest skills I think in leadership, folks, is nothing is a problem anymore. Everything is an opportunity. And I mean that I really try to take a lot of approaches in that case. So reframing is your ability to find something that's a pain point and look at it as opportunity. That is reframing. Pretty cool stuff. So here's my last question when it comes to EQ, and this is in the relationship management side of things. What? And vulnerability comes, and I once again do not want to mispronounce, and I want to say, is that Imtiaz? And please correct. I don't like to get names wrong. That is something I truly don't. Um, I always say every name comes with an identity, and that's really important to get to know the identity. So in this case, I love that vulnerability is the impasse. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's the openness that comes into play. So here's my question. Awesome. Awesome. Here is my last question. How do you navigate when somebody else is maybe not reframing? How do you navigate the dialogue when they're just pushing back and being resistant and causing frustration and maybe adding a little bit more fuel to the fire on this? This is my last question for you. And once again, I'll turn off the video. How do you manage that dialogue? Love what I'm seeing here. Try to get a third person. There's ways to talk it out. We're going to talk about help me understand. I love that I'm hearing rephrasing and reframing to try to make sure you're understanding them. Speak according to their language. And I love their language in the case of whether it's DISC or Clifton strengths, or if it's something like insights or emergenetics or something. The more that you get to know the language they love to communicate, the more that you're going to create deeper understanding with them. Excellent. And some of you are really nailing this of what constructive dialogue really is, right? And Byung, I love this too, is really the active listening of the deeper concerns and then finding the mutual benefit. This is awesome. And it really is understanding the other side. So I don't, and yeah, it is uniqueness. It is, Michael, absolutely. So I bring this up because there is a philosophy I want to teach you just to really keep in the back of your mind. And this is one of the most important ones that I find to be really critical. And absolutely, you never invalidate. That's huge. Here is one of the missions and the mantras that I truly try to make sure that I pay attention to. When somebody has a problem, don't just get it, get them. Get why it bothers them, dig deeper, get them, get them. And I'm not trying to turn this into marriage counseling, but I will tell you if my wife is ever upset with something, I don't just say that I get the situation. I truly try to understand why that's a pain point for her. I really try to take a deeper look and say it sounds like it's frustrating because, or it sounds like it's upsetting because, it sounds like it's causing you pain because. And that is a huge piece. Just don't just get it. And I'll tell you a good example is my wife was frustrated. She works for the government. And and what's really important here to note is that she gets updates, computer updates, because it's government and secure all the time. And so when that happens, her computer is always updated. Every time it updates, she goes, oh, she gets so frustrated. Now, I could do one of two things. I could either say, if you just go upstairs and get your coffee and step away from the computer while it's updating, it will make a big difference. Or what I could do is say, you know what? It sounds like this is really frustrating for you. And I don't know if I broke up there. I was ready to say something really pretty meaningful there, I think at least. But one of the big things that I always say is I can really just say, you know what? I need to really understand why this is bothering you. And no worries. What I was trying to say in this case was I could say it as, hey, if you just do this, it will work out for you. Or I could say, do you know what? I think I need to take a moment and I really need to ask you why this is really important to you. And it is, right? So I'm going to use another cheesy 90s reference. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Great Vanilla Ice, but there's two types of vanilla ices in the world. There's the ones that if there's a problem, they'll solve it. And there's another type of person that just wants to stop, collaborate, and listen. And so to me, that's where I need to go sometimes. And I think that's what really Q is the recognition of which people want to do what. Right. So I am if there's a problem, let's solve it. I don't want your empathy. I don't want your apologies. I don't want oh, I'm so sorry this happened. No, that and a screwdriver gives me a screwdriver. And I think that's something my wife does that's really great. And that's her emotional intelligence is she doesn't apologize. She just goes, hey, I think this is a way we can work forward. I think this is a way you can make X happen. Have you tried Y? Did you do Z? And that's her way to empathy for me. Where my way to empathy for her is slowing down and really listening and not solving. And it is, Alvin. It's very, I think there is a safe communication or safe conversations approach there. And what it is, and it is, Wasim, to some, apologies can really do a lot of good. To others, they don't want it. So, empathy, I need to redefine empathy for all of us for a minute. Empathy is your ability to truly step into not only what their situation is, but to really step into what moving forward looks like to them. And sometimes that means that you have to stop and listen and fully understand. And for others, it means I need to get through this. So push me through this. Those are key things. And you're absolutely right, Angie, is not responding immediately, right? Take time to really consider it, really show the depth in the understanding. And Terry, which do you want me to repeat? The empathizing doesn't require apologizing, that some people they need to just get through what they need to get through, and others that empathy really means stopping and truly listening and really taking steps back. I think we think empathizing is just truly sitting in the suck, as they say, and just living in the suck with them. And yeah, that's one road to empathy. But for others, they need to, some people, if they're not moving, they're dying. So you need to help them get unstuck. That can also be empathy. That's what makes empathy so cool, is it's your true awareness of the other. So, and I love this. I'm seeing people say it's really important to be empathetic and not sympathetic. I do agree. I think empathy is a massive, massive skill needed in today's leadership. So, I'm going to teach you about what is called constructive dialogue. And this is where it's driven in a space of what we call enquiry, not inquiry, not with an I, inquiry with an E. Inquiry with an I is closed-ended questions that are going to get to answers. Enquiry is asking truly for the purpose of discovery, the true understanding of help me learn this, help me understand it, help me get to where you are. And what that does is that anytime somebody's giving you pushback, you never, ever, ever look like the adversary. You never, ever look like you're creating the argument. You're always, it's so hard to fight somebody on your side. That's the difference. So I'm going to walk you through a brief process, and then we are going to wrap up with any final questions and wrapping up for today. So here it is. Number one, the first mindset that comes in is that anytime there's pushback moving forward, you and me, you versus me, is an arena that doesn't exist anymore. And I will share a story that I've heard sometime. When I was in leadership at one point in my career, I was a younger fella, and I had somebody that was in leadership for a lot longer, and I had some ideas. And it was one of those things of, maybe when you get a little bit more experience in this space, some of these ideas, you'll see why they don't work, and maybe it's just good to sit back and understand it a little bit. And for me, I could take this one of two ways. I could either go into rage or go into you versus me, or I could say, you know what? Here's an opportunity to reframe us versus the opportunity. So the quicker that you shift from you versus me to us versus the opportunity, the quicker you can move through the constructive dialogue purposefully. So in this case, when I use that as an example, I said, you know what? I think that's a fair point. I think all of us, regardless of how long we've been, can really learn by just taking a couple steps back and being open-minded. I agree with that. I think you're spot on. So hard. How do you fight that, folks? How do you argue that? Your ability to shift the mindset that no other problems moving forward are problems. Everything is now us versus the opportunity ahead of us. That's the first mindset. Then from there, it's a quick process. It's a 1, 2, 3. Number one, I use enquiry phrasing. And what that means is you have to find your authentic phrase. Being blunt, being a little bit blunt, I am not somebody that help me understand works for me. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't come off authentic. Mine is talk to me about that. Do you know what? I don't think this is going to work. Talk to me. I'm in. Why not? I'm in. I love using that phrase. That is my enquiry phrase, is talk to me. Others I've seen, hey, walk me through what that looks like. Hey, show me what that looks like to you. Some it is help me understand. Some it is, hey, explain it to me. I'm missing something. And you can put the onus on you and say, I'm missing something. Explain it to me. The first thing you got to do is open them up with enquiry. And that's correct, Michael, is as you're doing that, this is what mirroring gets into. And this is where you're focusing in. You're dialing into the active listening because you're truly trying to listen to the deeper point here. And what you do is you mirror and rephrase in a way that is your language. And that's the big thing, Erica, is you have to, once again, find your phrases. Okay. And I will tell you, I make a guttural noise with it. It'll be, okay. All right. I think I'm with you now. So what you're saying is, or, hold on. Okay. I think I'm with you now. It appears as if Okay. So now I'm with you. What I'm hearing is, and you have to give that room for deeper acknowledgement that you truly get them. This is where you demonstrate that you really get them. And it is the paraphrasing. And absolutely. And I got Michael says, paraphrasing back what they said. And Michael says, for visual learning, show me is a little bit more visual and interactive. It can be. Yeah. And that's why the more that you have the social awareness to know the way people prefer to communicate, the more you can lean into it. Now, we teach classes on that that's engagement focus, it's true strategic and meaningful engagement. Now, here is one of the greatest phrases I use. And I love this with every fiber of my being, and I throw it in between here. And what I say is, okay, so I got you now. So what you're saying is, and please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Why do you think I love using that phrase so much in the way that that was said? Okay, so it seems as if, and please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. It is, it's showing deep care. It's disarming. It shows vulnerability, and it allows them at the very, very end. It shows active listening. It is humbling, and it shows you're open. You're apps and Rhonda, bingo. That's the other piece that I was looking for. Is it gives them the opportunity to restate the issue if you are wrong. So at the very best case scenario, what they're going to give you is exactly, exactly. And that's what you really root for. The second best case scenario is going to be, yeah, mostly, yeah, or kind of, yeah, yeah. There's another piece, and they can get deeper into what the real issue is. And the third one, worst case scenario is not quite. They're not going to be like, no, you're dumb. Like they're not going to do that because once again, you're creating a context for agreement. So in this case, what they're going to give you is not quite, not quite what it really is. So it and that's what it does, Donna, is that it gives much more clarity. It removes the ambiguity out of the issue. So that's why I love correct me if I'm wrong. Moving forward, and this is yeah, and Terry, that's right. And then if they reiterate, you know what? Thank you for that. Or you know what? I'm so glad that makes so much more sense. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Yeah, find your phrase. Find your phrase. The third piece of this, and I will tell you, I'm putting a star next to this because I can't tell you how many times that we put in the work here and then we just shoot ourselves clean in the foot in number 3. You are not allowed to use the word but anymore. If they have opened their wound up to you, you are not allowed to say but. Well, Steve, nicely done. In this case, what we typically do is this. Okay. I absolutely see what you're saying. I also think there's an opportunity here that we can look into blank. I also think, you know what? I also feel like there's something here that we can dive into as well, and that we can marry this a little bit. I go to also or and communication because it makes it much more inclusive, and that is where emotional competence is truly shown. So no more buts. They can't happen. And it really is, Michael. Your phrasing. I think that's one of the biggest things in emotional intelligence is it's not just the awareness; it's the communication of said awareness. Absolutely. Now, I know that there was a question, and I want to come back to it because I know I missed one because it was really important. Is enquiry? Felix asked a question that said, "Is enquiry about the whole person or only in professional side?" I think it's in what they're willing to give you, Felix. And like I said, we do like disc assessments. If they are more of like a D or a C, like a dominant or a conscientious person, they're going to be a little bit more guarded on the whole human component side of things. Whereas if they're more I and S driven, they're going to be much more open on the personal side. So what I always say is allow them to let in what they want to let in. That's a amazing, amazing question. But enquiry is your ability to truly try to understand the whole person, but you get what you can take. Alvin, Mariella will talk to that. Absolutely. It is going to be, it is it is going to be recorded. Yes, this is recorded. There will be access. I believe it's sent. I'm going to let her speak to that. And yes, Kimberly, equating EI to listening and trusting your intuition, that is truly where the self-awareness comes in, and then also the self-management. You're right. All right. Any other questions here before we pass it over to Mariella?
I will go ahead and also give our audience any like a quick minute to throw any last minute questions in, but we do have a couple in the Q&A. We had one here from Billy. EI and AI, any correlation? It's a nice little topic.
Yeah, so EI and AI, so I think over time, and this is what research is kind of getting into, is AI is going to develop some scale of emotional intelligence as things continue to go. I think that's going to be one of the hardest things for it to start replicating, because once again, it's learned patterns of behavior. It's it's learned patterns of things as the way that AI generates that information. I think honestly, where humans are truly going to thrive in their environments is truly on the social emotional brain side of things, is going to be their way to be more creative, to allow more room for deeper communication, to allow more human to human interaction. The AI is the tool that can help us do that. So I think that right now, I think emotional intelligence is one of the things that AI is not catching up to at the moment because that's not the priority. Right now, AI is highly, highly generative. It is output focused. But I do think over time we're going to see that change.
100%. Such a good question. And one more
Agreed.
question here. I think, yeah, this will actually be the last one. What if there is a level of emotional brokenness?
Ooh. So if there is a now my guess my understanding to that question is that there has been a lot of damage, like there's been a lot of damage in this case. If there is truly some meaningful emotional damage, I think what happens is we have to recognize what our limitations are. I don't think we're all therapists in this case. I don't think, but I always try to recommend that if there's a deeper pain point, that they confide in somebody that they truly trust, that they take the extra moments to do so, because being able to communicate that allows the burden to be lifted. Now, in some cases, that may be, I'm not telling you that you recommend professional help or communication for others, but I always say, I think it's always important to really find somebody that you can truly confide in. And, if that person's me, I'm happy to help. But if that person is somebody else, you know, I always say find that person.
Absolutely. Very vital for navigating in your career. 100%. Great question. Great question. And I think that would be the last question aside from all the questions about the recording, which you will definitely be getting in an email after the webinar. So if you weren't able to attend the full session, do not fret. You will be getting a recording link in your email, and you can watch it back whenever you can.
And
And yeah, go ahead.
before we hop off here, folks, I want to talk to you a moment, just last 30 seconds. How many of you are liking this style to where it's not just content, but you're really liking more of the chat participation of the webinars? Because I know that that's more of where that is. Or are you looking for more of like, hey, no, I just want topics, I want content, just give me the meat, just for my edification, because we are going to use this for additional research, additional approaches. I really try to make things facilitative, but if that is not what we're craving here, it's always, I want that feedback, please.
And it looks like it's an overwhelming absolutely yes. So thank you all so
Okay.
much for that feedback. This is really
Yes.
good info for sure.
I can't thank you all enough for that. So truly, genuinely appreciate it.
100%. And thank you all so much for joining us today. If you guys need any more info on this topic, please do not be afraid to visit us at watermarklearning.com, or you can hit that quick link I dropped in the chat to learn a little bit more on expanding your emotional intelligence. And other than that, I think just to be super mindful of everyone's time, I think that'll be it for us today.
Awesome.
So thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Dr. J.
Hey, thanks everybody. I appreciate you all. And like I said, click on that link to learn more.
Absolutely. Thank you all again, and we'll see you all very soon in the classroom. Bye now.